Broadcasting from the heart of the nation, the next generation in conservative talk radio. This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Yes, it is. What's up, my friends? Welcome into it. Hey, it's a Monday. Greatest day of the entire week as we set that tone. We are ready to go for the whole week, and boy, is there a lot to talk about as usual. Hopefully you had a wonderful weekend. You will be proud of me. I, for the very first time in years, sat down and watched an entire football game on Sunday. Yeah, I know. It was pretty wild. So I sat down, I watched the entire thing. Wasn't necessarily impressed with it. Kind of reminded me why it bores the crap out of me. But nonetheless, I watched it. And we'll break some of that down. We have the Super Bowl that we can talk about. We have some news today. Apparently, Democrats are now, again, that document of convenience. Whenever it's convenient for them to completely shift gears and change their tone on an issue, they are all about doing it. What's the latest there? And, of course, Austen Bannon. He's coming up at the bottom of the hour. He's a labor expert with our friends and partners over at Americans for Prosperity. So, that being said, welcome into it. It is The Voice Reason. I'm Andy Hoosier as we continue to
do it live.
There it is. So great to have you as usual. All right, first and foremost, did you watch the big game? I know that conservatives, especially, we've been on the downward trend of actually paying attention or caring about the Super Bowl, and it's really turned into a spectacle outside of just a football game, but everything else that goes along with it. And because of the anti-American stance that the NFL has taken for so many years, it's been very difficult to get more Republicans and conservatives back on board to support the NFL. That being said, I will say that overall, I was very impressed with how they handled certain particular issues, especially being down in New Orleans and embracing the culture. I thought it was kind of neat. Their rendition of America the Beautiful is really cool. Kind of a New Orleans style, bluesy kind of thing with how they did that one. Singing the national anthem, how they did kind of a bluesy style, New Orleans style to that song, I thought was great. I was very impressed with the fact that they actually supported law enforcement. They supported the military. They had law enforcement down on the field, and they gave them recognition for some event that happened down in New Orleans just recently, and made some of the parents or family members or whatever happened kind of co-captains of the actual team for the coin flip, and they did a big commemoration. So I thought that was neat. I thought it was really cool. I am glad that I was happy when we saw that Donald Trump got cheered and that Taylor Swift ended up getting booed. So I'm okay with that. That made me happy. At the end of the day, that made me proud that we saw the NFL kind of change course. And I guarantee you that change in course, that mindset with the NFL changed when Donald Trump got into office. I know some have been telling me, for those that know, obviously, I work for a cluster of radio stations. There's a sports station right next to me here, right across. I can see them through the glass windows as we speak right now. They've been telling me the NFL has been backing off on some of the anti-American propaganda that they've been spreading and spouting for years, and that they've gone more patriotic again because they remember their base. They remember who they're actually appealing to, and the base of sports fanatics are people that are relatively pro-American. Are ones that want to be left alone really necessarily in politics and just want to watch the sport, but they're very patriotic and they love their nation, which is why they like seeing the American flag. They like seeing the national anthem, and they were proud. So I was happy to see that last night. And for the first time, a sitting president, Donald Trump, shows up at the Super Bowl, goes down on the field, shakes some hands. Everybody goes crazy. They show him when they were actually doing either America the Beautiful or the national anthem. They showed him, and his hands were, in saluting the military. Everybody goes crazy. It was exciting. And then, of course, Taylor Swift gets booed, which even makes me more happy. That being said, the game itself, I was zero interest in. I kind of laughed because being in Kansas, obviously there are a lot of Kansas City Chiefs fans around here, and I just don't care one way or the other. So I was gauging the mood of my coworkers today, and many of them were pretty sour with how things turned out from the game last night. Again, I could care less on that one way or the other. Outside of that, commercials, vaguely better than what we've seen in the past few years. I'll give that an A+ as well. All right. At least an A. The Dorito commercial was probably my favorite, the one where the UFO was trying to steal the bag of Doritos, and then they steal the bag of Doritos, and then the UFO explodes, and then the guy and the alien sitting there at the end eating Doritos. I thought that was pretty entertaining. I laughed at that one. Also, there was a good one for the Tick Picks. Yeah, the older ladies sitting on the golf course, and they were like, oh, my boyfriend just sent this to me. What are you watching? Oh, we're looking at the Tick Picks. What? Yeah, that was a good one. That was pretty comical. There was the One with Harrison Ford, kind of more of a motivational thing. One with Kevin Costner, bit of a motivational thing. The one with Brad Pitt, I know that was kind of a promo for the game itself, very motivational. It was nice. There were a lot of A-list actors in those commercials last night, a lot of them, which kind of surprised me. And I don't know necessarily why, because I would have thought that after the election, where we realized that we really don't care what elite celebrities in Hollywood have to say, that we really would have backed off on the whole, I'm a celebrity, look at me. And I really thought we would have backed off on that, because a lot of them obviously endorsed Kamala Harris. That didn't quite work out for them in the general election. So why they focus so much on that, I don't know, unless it was their rebranding of trying to come back and say, I'm part of you. I'm related with you. I totally get it. I'm an average person just like you. And I want to try and talk about some very important issues. If that's the case, then I guess it worked. I don't know. There were some that made me chuckle a little bit. Others were just kind of meh. But I will say the Doritos was probably my favorite, and the Tick Picks was Mrs. Voice of Reason's favorite, because that was pretty comical. Outside of that, there weren't a whole lot of ahas. I did not see, someone said the Carl's Jr. ad was going to run again, like the old school. They were going back to the old school of like the girl in the bikini eating the massive, like, huge hamburger from Carl's Jr. I didn't see that ad. I don't know if I missed it, but I didn't see that one. And yeah, that was about it. It was nice to see the Clydesdale again from Budweiser. Now that Budweiser, I guess, is back in the United States, they're trying to bring back that one. Bud Light had a brief ad in there, but it wasn't very a standout kind of commercial. Outside of that, it was just average. And I will say this as I do every single year, the halftime show was absolutely stupid, and I will not pay attention to a halftime show until we actually get someone that's not on the top 40 list with either pop or rap. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it, man. I want rock and roll, I want metal, I want something to get you actually excited and pumped up. You would think for a halftime show, you want something to get you pumped up and excited. That did not happen last night with some weird rap song, and I couldn't care less about. I don't even remember his name, but it was horrible, and I just didn't get into it whatsoever. So until you actually get a rock show, and I'm not talking about my rock, double bass screaming, can't understand a word they're saying, I would enjoy that. That would make me very happy. Could you imagine the Super Bowl halftime show with half the crowd down on the field doing this massive mosh pit? That would be hilarious. I know it's not going to happen, but at least for God's sakes, get us Metallica or something. Get us something a little bit edgier to get you pumped up and excited for the second half. But until then, major fail. Sorry. And that being said, that's about all I took away from it. I am glad that we saw a little bit more pro-American movement from the NFL, and the Super Bowls were marginally better than the last couple of years. Other than that, Tom Brady was a horrible commentator, by the way, if you noticed that as well. This reiterates, and I think this goes into talk radio too and other medium platforms, that just because you're a celebrity or an athlete or an elected official that's retired and you're looking for your next gig just to try and coast along with a paycheck does not mean that you can just all of a sudden become a talk show host or a commentator and everybody flock to you. There are bad commentators out there and there are bad talk show hosts out there, and just because you have that name does not mean that all of a sudden you are a great orator out there. That's not the case. Tom Brady stumbled his way through it the whole time. He was very choppy in his deliverance. It was bad. I get it. Might have been his first time, maybe just nervous or something. I don't know. But it was kind of a failure on my end. So there you go. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it. That was my take from it. Did you watch the big game? If not, then good on you. I don't really care. Is it going to make me watch any more games? Probably not. I don't know. I mean, at least they're not doing anti-American kneeling during the national anthem garbage. So that's good. But will it sit there and make me actually watch more NFL? I had zero interest in actually watching the game itself. I don't care. Really just don't care. All right.
What's trending today?
Austen Bannon, he's a labor expert with our partners over at Americans for Prosperity. He'll be joining us here at the bottom of the hour. I am, as we are looking at the media today, the headlines and the Democrats now, they're trying to figure out ways to go after Donald Trump. And Donald Trump apparently left the Super Bowl early, so that was an indication as well, I guess, on whether it was going well or not. But the media and the Democrats are trying to find a game plan to stop Donald Trump and his agenda. They don't have one. They don't know what to do. They've never had to go at the pace that Donald Trump is going with his 300-plus executive orders. Already within the first 3 weeks of an administration, having a bill passed with the Laken-Riley Act that was passed by Congress, signed by the president, and put into law. We see the mass deportations. We see the deregulation. We see the DOJ. I mean, they are losing. Their hair is on fire. and they have to come up with a game plan. And that's been the speculation really since election time is what are they going to do? They can't go after Donald Trump with like a scandal, opening up an investigation, try to impeach him for some kind of, sexual thing or colluding with Russia. They can't do that anymore. They burnt their bridges for the 4 years prior to when he was in office, the 4 years when he wasn't in office trying to destroy him, and now they have nothing left. So they have to come up with a game plan to slow the Trump agenda. And I don't know that it's necessarily going to work, but when we talk about what I've coined on this program is the document of convenience, aka the Constitution, Democrats always conveniently only talk about it and use it when it's convenient for them. And now, after years, and I mean years, starting with the Obama administration, using the scare tactic that if Republicans don't get on board with their agenda, then it's Republicans' fault the government's going to shut down. And if you shut down the government, then people will lose their benefits. We're going to die in the streets. It's going to be the most horrible thing on the face of the earth, right?
We're all going to die because of you!
And that's the tactic that they've used. Get on board with us and do our bidding, or else the government will shut down and it's your fault. Well, now they're openly saying, according to the headlines today and from the different interviews that we saw for their Sunday morning programs, is that now Democrats are willing to purposefully shut down the government. Right?
Say what?
I know.
The strategy is to do whatever we can to stop Donald Trump from hurting Americans, from making us less safe, less secure, and from raising our costs.
You are open to voting yes to shut down the government, to make this point.
This is on them. We are at a point where we are basically on the cusp of a constitutional crisis, seeing this administration taking steps that are so clearly illegal. And until we see a change in that behavior, we should not allow and condone that, nor should we assist in that.
Whoa. That was Cory Booker and Andy Kim, two different interviews, two separate networks, interviewing on Sunday morning programs. Now it's apparently okay to shut down the government. Remind me, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm still trying to wrap my head around this because Democrats have been so over the place. We almost don't, we're almost not surprised any longer when they completely change their tone on an issue, because they've told us multiple times when they were in charge that this is going to be the bill, we will ram this through, regardless whether it's constitutional or not, regardless whether it's good for Americans or not, we will ram this through. We have to pass it to see what's in it, so that way we don't even know what's in the bill. And Republicans have to get on board. They must vote for this. And if they stop our legislation, the government will shut down, and it's their fault. And if it's their fault, then we can say that people won't get their Social Security benefits, that memorials in Washington, D.C. will shut down. We won't have any security with our Department of Defense because we have to furlough a bunch of people, and the nation will crumble if the government shuts down. How dare you even consider letting the government shut down and people be at the whims without a government in some aspect?
Say what?
We've heard that since the Obama administration. Now we got to put the government somehow in check. We're going into a constitutional crisis. Donald Trump's going too quickly. And if we have to shut down the government with the budget vote in March, when we look at a continuing resolution or some type of reconciliation bill, if we don't vote for it and the government shuts down, it's us saving the nation, even if the government shuts down. Now, the hypocrisy, the lies, man, they continue to bury their own grave and dig their own holes even after major losses. It's pathetic.
This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier. When reason meets radio. This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
What can you do about this? There are some raising the possibility of shutting down the government in March when some of these funding bills come up for a vote. Do you think Democrats should stand in the way?
I think Hakeem Jeffries, I do trust him to be, he is our leader. and we will use whatever power we have. They will need Democratic votes to pass this budget. And fundamentally, we're not going to vote for something that undermines the American people.
Wow. So it's okay to undermine us for every time when you've expanded the budget unconstitutionally. But now that we're cutting it, how dare you do things that we don't like? We're going to shut down the government, and it's for the greater good. So all of you on the social programs, you can just survive without those. And we're going to shut down the government because we don't care about you now. What are we doing? My mind's blown in. By the way, that was Congresswoman Val Hoyle, a Democrat out of Oregon. That was her interview on CNN. She did say something interesting as well when she talked about exactly what's going on with this DOJ and the audits. And just like what we've heard from other Democrats now, too, they're openly trying to say, well, we totally would be open to an audit. And they're trying to say, yeah, we could look at things. We could see if we could cut somewhere. Like they're now all of a sudden okay with wanting to look internally within these agencies. Before, if we've done that, no, it's running fine. There's no waste whatsoever. How could you even consider that we would be wasteful spending as a federal government?
Well, I think that there's two different missions. Certainly the bipartisan group, most of my colleagues, I would say, truly want to find efficiency in government, right?
Sure,
we have three different branches of government, and as the legislative branch, we came here to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars.
Okay, hold on, before we go further. You got to remember, how long have these individuals been in office? How many budgets have they passed or not passed? Because we don't pass a federal budget anymore. We do it as an omnibus package or a continuing resolution. How long have we been going through this? DOJ is a necessity because it's something Congress refused to do. Congress, the House and the Senate, have been voting on budgets or omnibus packages or continuing resolutions for decades. We went from the budget to an omnibus package really since under the Obama administration. And Congress has not said, gee, let's look at this massive increase in spending where we kept ourselves from 18% usage or 20% usage of the GDP to now in 2025, we're spending at a 120% of the GDP, which means if we stole every single penny out of the private sector from man, woman, child, and small business across the country, we would still be 20% short on all of the spending that we have in this country. That's insane. When we used to cap it and say federal government could not spend more than 20%, Congress voted for that. They have not done audits. They have not done reviews. They have not cut from departments and agencies. They haven't done it for years. But now all of a sudden, as DOJ is going in and cleaning out and exposing what they've been doing behind the scenes, they're like, well, we're totally open to doing it, but it can't be from some crazy radical guy like Elon Musk who just has, unintended powers in Congress. Guess what? That's what it takes because you jerks haven't done it for so long.
To make good policy, and again, work in good faith to find efficiencies, whether that's investing in IT or, combining agencies or departments, making sure we don't have too much bureaucracy. But fundamentally, you can't do that while government is being blown up from the inside. And let's be clear, Donald Trump and Elon Musk have a different mission. They say it's about efficiency and saving taxpayer dollars. It isn't. It's about intimidating workers, breaking our government, and installing loyalists that are loyal to Donald Trump and Elon Musk and not to the American people or the Constitution.
Yeah, okay. First off, that's not true whatsoever, although we are putting people in place that have the same agenda because that's the message that American voters actually want. But you could have done this on your own and come to us every year and said, hey, these are the consolidations we can do. These are the cuts that we can do. This is where we can trim things out. This is where we can get rid of some of the bureaucratic red tape to where we can make sure things are running smoother than what they were. You haven't, so we will. And yes, we're going to blow up these agencies.
This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier. Truth, reason, and common sense. This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Hello, everybody. Hello, sir. How are you? Nice to see you.
Are you good? Good.
Are you all set? We're flying over right now. We're flying over a thing called the Gulf of America, and I'm signing a proclamation, and perhaps you could define that.
This is a proclamation declaring today, February 9th, 2025, 2025 as the first ever Gulf of America Day. This follows the President's executive order issuing a name change from the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America.
And we're flying right over it right now. So we thought this would be appropriate. Even bigger than the Super Bowl. This is a big thing. And almost everybody now has assented to that.
Attention on board. Ladies and gentlemen, if you could please direct your attention out the right side of the aircraft. Air Force One is currently in international waters, for the first time in history, flying over the recently renamed Gulf of America. Please enjoy the flight, and we are now about to head westbound to Super Bowl 59.
Wow, he did that well.
That's awesome. So that was on the flight to the Super Bowl, President Trump signing that executive action, that proclamation that yesterday, apparently, February 9th, put it on the calendar, my friends, is the celebration of the Gulf of America, baby. And that's all right. That was well timed as well, too, with the captain coming on saying, oh, we're in international water. We're flying over the Gulf of America, and we're going to celebrate that as well. Donald Trump signing that. I find that kind of interesting. That's well done, President Trump. You know what? Why the heck not, right?
What's trending today?
All right, let's get into what's trending here, shall we? A lot going on, obviously, with everything, the 300-plus executive orders the Trump administration's been signing, but especially on the economic front, there's a new piece of information or a new study that kind of surprises me, but in a good way, that even with the change that we're seeing and the push of support that unions had been giving to the Trump administration, especially going into the campaign and by campaign. I mean, how do you endorse Donald Trump without saying you endorse Donald Trump? Just saying, I'm staying out of it completely. And that's what we saw from most unions in the nation in the last election, because Kamala was doing so bad that they couldn't support her, so they just said they were staying out of it. Internal polling showed that union members were overwhelmingly supporting Donald Trump in many aspects. And now, where is union membership and union support? Apparently, they're on the decline. We'll talk about that and more. Really happy to have on labor experts. We've had him on many times before with our partners over at Americans for Prosperity, Mr. Austen Bannon. Austen, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, and with your segue into that, Americans like breaking records, but you say this is kind of the inverse record we're here to talk about.
Yeah.
Unions are at their lowest rate ever since it's been tracked. And
that's wild.
A trend for the years.
Yeah, so last year, the last couple of years, really, we've seen a really big push from unions. I mean, we saw even after that major auto union strike when Joe Biden was out there trying to picket with them, which I found ironic because you're essentially saying, hey, the economy sucks under me so bad, you need better wages, so I'm going to give you better wages. So he was out picketing with the labor unions, and at that time, the UAW made the comment that they want all labor unions within the auto industry to sync up their contracts to be the same time. They wanted other unions in other industries to sync up around the same time, so that way when they strike, they have a massive impact on the entire economy. They essentially shut down any type of production, any type of distribution. They essentially just bring the economy to a halt because they openly said they wanted a new revolution of blue-collar workers under union leadership. It sounds like, Austen, that's not quite working out the way they wanted to.
Only to the extent that now less than 6% of private workers can do all that. But you're right, it hasn't, despite 4 years from the Biden administration to be a very pro-union leader. I like to kind of say it isn't as pro-worker as advertised, but pro-union leader in terms of their agenda. And that's not what people have wanted. They like the ideals of what they're told a union might be about, but the reality of what the union is hasn't met what people are looking for in the 21st century.
That's wild. So the record that we're seeing now that you guys have reported is that we're seeing this record low. You said only 6% of workers. That blows my mind because I thought, especially with the impact and how loud of a voice that many unions have, you would think that number would be a lot higher.
That's right. And so, just to clarify a little bit, almost one in three government workers are in a union, and the highest unionization rate in America actually belongs to teachers. But yeah, when it comes to the private sector, we're talking about less than 6% right now. And I think you hear a lot about it because of the high-profile strikes, and you see it with. And it's a lot of industries that could impact people. It's the ports, it's the auto, it's the railway. You get attention because Hollywood was on strike because of the way they get attention in media. And then you might hear about a Starbucks unionization drive in your local town or people walking out. But when it really comes to reality of hundreds of millions of working Americans, the unions haven't had as much of a presence as they try to show in media.
That's wild. So I guess the question is, why? What are they seeing through what the unions are doing and properly not representing them? Do they just not see the worth of it? Because, I'm hoping that the economy gets so good, obviously, under Trump, which I'm optimistic it will, with what we're doing to deregulate, cut spending, actually cut taxes, see economic growth, that there's no reason for a union because I'm going to be making good money. I don't need to be out there picketing for better whatever, X, Y, and Z, fill in the blank, because things are going so well. That's not at the top of my mind. But before we get to that point, why are we seeing so few people just not have any interest in the unions?
Big thing for me is when you look at a union agenda, they operate like they did 50, 60, 70 years ago. And the American workforce is nothing like that. And yes, there's the one sort of eye on the prize. People think maybe they could make more money. They can get higher wages, perhaps with union negotiations. But really, that kind of rises and falls with the economy. We had years of inflation. They didn't allow people to, even if they got some pay increases, it didn't mean it was keeping up with the cost of living in a way that made things better for their family. And aside from that one issue, that potential unions are trying to negotiate, they actually negotiate away other things that people want. They want flexibility for their families. They want opportunities to, distinguish themselves at the workplace. They don't stay at the same workplace for a full career. A lot of the things the unions negotiate, it applies to everyone. People who are senior and junior in the workplaces. In terms of their workplace policies. So, families don't operate that way anymore. And I also like to point out 70 million people, and even more than that, each year it's growing, do some amount of freelance work each year. And that's a combination of people who do it for a little bit of side income and those who are self-employed for a career. But that kind of work, as it grows in popularity, it's not growing in popularity because people don't want it. It's growing in popularity because all of a sudden they have access to that kind of type of work. The technology people use, it's not just mobile phones and things that took off, a decade, 15 years ago, but now the different platforms that people can create business with, and they can work with so many different clients. They have so much more access to customers and kind of create their own destiny. And working mothers and others that want to be in the workplace that can't work a normal job, unions don't offer solutions for those kind of people in those situations.
It's a really great point. I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to mention that, and ask you about that. I mean, really, I think since COVID, we've seen a major increase in that from contract work. I'm going to work from home. I'm not going to work at the 9-to-5 job as an employee for a company, but I'm going to be a 1099. I'm going to be a freelancer. I'm going to be a contract worker, and I'm going to take matters into my own hands. That's exciting, especially for younger generations where I think they like to make their own schedule. They like to work maybe how they want to, and they can take the responsibility of filing their taxes, being a small business owner. That's really good news. Is that maybe making people realize, and especially for the younger generation, again, I'm a millennial. My millennial generation, I guess, now is finally starting to acknowledge they're adults and have to do adulting things, which is kind of pathetic. But if you do see the younger generation saying, I want to be a freelancer as opposed to just having the steady 9-to-5 job, that shows that they're taking responsibility in their hands and saying, I want to be a business owner. I'm going to dictate my own schedule and do my own thing and make my own living, realizing that unions really don't have a whole lot to offer for them.
That's right. And it's, unions are actually, driving their numbers down, and people are doing that more, partly because workplaces don't have the flexibility to do that. There's rules and regulations from the federal government that get in the way. And then unions themselves, they don't want that flexibility because ideally, whether you have a traditional job or you're self-employed, we could have more flexibility for everyone. And that would cater to people wanting to work different hours and do different types of work, and not always for the same person. But there's so many rules that prevent those opportunities. And, we're seeing a lot of changes around the states around this. And I think places like California that were really anti-independent worker, they had, I think listeners have heard about this in the past, but they instituted a harmful, what's called an ABC test. And it basically makes it very difficult, if not impossible, to be a self-employed independent contractor. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people were actually center-left voters. They were Biden-type supporters until they were faced with this issue and unions going against them. They took away their livelihood. And that starts to shift people, away from the traditional union model and realizing that there's more opportunity to work on your own and Some people are in favor of it, and others are a threat to it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So there's almost like a generational or a cultural shift just in the entire nation of just, I would rather just make my own schedule, do my own thing, as opposed to, the idea that we had of like the 1950s and 60s. I'm going to work my 9-to-5 job. I'm going to have my nice pension. I'm going to get taken care of. I just want my white picket fence and go to work 9 to 5 and come home and not worry about things. That mindset's completely shifted. And like you said, it sounds like unions are still stuck in that mindset, not realizing there's a cultural shift happening before our eyes.
That's right. They could be an association that represents just about anything. They could, be strong trainers for people with different skill sets they want. They could offer a lot of services.
Yeah.
Not only unions, but they have a place, likely if they wanted to modernize. But they've stuck with that model because it's attached to getting union dues and then spending it on political goals, rather than improving workplace for individuals.
Well, yeah, and I don't know how the unions are going to be able to come back and adapt to that, to the new age, if everybody's doing everything on their own individually as a freelancer, a contractor, and just working on their own, making their own schedule. You can't tell them that they can only work 9 to 5 and they're going to have better wages. If they want to work, 20 hours a day and they're working numerous different jobs on their own, you can't tell them no. So that's going to be interesting to see how unions adapt to that new culture shift. Austen, hang on the line. We got to take a hard break here. It's Austen Bannon, labor expert with Americans for Prosperity. When we come back, I want to talk about some public unions and how the federal government may be shifting just a little bit as well with what's going on in D.C. Lots more coming up. Stay right here.
This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier. America's safe space for common sense. This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Why, yes, it is. What's up? Welcome into it. Got a couple minutes left here as we wrap up a Monday. We are setting that tone for the entire week, my friends. We are rebranding the millennial generation, one radio listener at a time. So great to have you all over the place. We have some new affiliates coming on, by the way, soon. Looking forward to announcing those as we continue on. So there was a headline over the weekend from Breitbart News. And now I know this is still being battled in the courts right now on whether it's allowed or not, but apparently, according to Breitbart, roughly 65,000 federal workers have accepted the buyout to leave the federal government as we continue to see that decrease of federal employees under DOGE with that potential buyout and them being able to, move into the private sector. How terrible of a thing, right? 65,000 openly accepting that buyout. At the same time, the USAID, which has been under the scope from the DOGE department, saw a cut of more than 9,000 workers out of there, leaving only roughly 600 employees. Imagine that. You had over 10,000 workers. You cut 9,800, 9,700. You have 600 left from 10,000.
Say what?
That's impressive. If we could do that in every agency at the federal level, I would be so happy. So happy. We're hanging out with Austen Bannon right now. He's a labor expert with Americans for Prosperity. Austen, I teased as we went into the break about the labor unions for the public sector. This DOGE department, this investigation that we're seeing right now, the cutting of federal workers, I can only imagine these public employees are losing their minds. And as you mentioned, I know that the teachers are essentially the biggest public sector labor union in the country. But some of those that are at the federal level, they're probably not too happy with what's going on right now, are they?
There's a lot of changes underway, and you mentioned it. There's a effort to offer 8 months buyout, which is obviously, on many respects generous, but trying to usher some people to leave that were on the fence, that may not want to be a part of the administration at this point. And a judge actually just shortly before we started our conversation has continued to block on this retirement plan that he's offered. I don't know there's great justification as to why it couldn't be offered, but in the meantime, that's still on hold. But as you said, they monitored and said over 65,000 we're ready to take up the offer, and that might increase as the court sort of holds on this. By the time it's done, there might be even many more people that want to do it.
Yeah. What would be the argument they use to say you're not allowed to offer this 8-month buyout? I mean, I get that it's hard to get rid of federal employees. It's hard to get rid of government employees in general just because. But what would be the reasoning that the judge would say, no, you're not allowed to offer someone an 8-month buyout for them to leave their job willingly and then offer them 8 months worth of salary for them to go find something else? Like, I don't understand why that would be bad.
I've been looking into it. I don't know if there's a strong justification as to why it couldn't be done. I know there's a political argument. Unions are highlighting, and there's a somewhat related issue that I could quickly mention to you and listeners, but it's called Schedule F, an effort that President Trump did in his first administration, but it was at the very end, and so it didn't really go into effect. But he wanted to make more of the managerial level positions employment at will, and it's basically if you're a president, you have an agenda. There's courts and there's others that try to uphold the Constitution if agencies are going rogue. But he wants, just like any president, to be able to have his administration execute its plan and have agency heads actually carry out his agenda. And this was going to allow more people to be employment at will so administrations could come in and actually hire people that wanted to execute the job they wanted. And so there's an argument from unions that they're laying out in court that this is an effort to get people to retire and just replace them with political appointees or political cronies, as they say, from their end. But really, this is just something that any administration would like. It's not to say that there aren't people who want to serve federal administrations from one to the next.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of high-level people. When you have a new regulatory agenda, you need to be able to have people that work for you that actually execute your game plan.
It's a great point. Yeah, and at the end of the day, for those that just don't want a political bias in some of the administrative states, that would be the reason and a great argument of why we shouldn't have such a big administrative state in the first place. So that way, regardless of what side individuals are on, we don't have to worry about something like that. It is wild to see, like you said, there's a massive reset and a lot of changes going on. It's going to be societal changes that it's going to take some time for a lot of people to adapt to. And I'm okay with that because I think they're absolutely needed. And it's going to be fun to watch them all fall into place. Austen Bannon, labor expert with Americans for Prosperity. We love partnering with AFP on the program each and every day. By the way, you can go check out their website as well with their campaign they have ongoing right now, which is protectprosperity.com. Austen, keep up the fight, my friend. I love having you on the show. Let's do it again real soon, brother.
Thank you.
Hey, always a pleasure. There it is, Austen Bannon. We'll get him back on again soon as we continue to follow the labor market and the unions. They're on the decrease. And I have an inkling that as the economy continues to grow and do well, more people want to start businesses, more individuals want to freelance and go contract work, that 6% in the private sector that are labor workers may even decrease even more. Back at it again tomorrow for a Tuesday. Until then, we'll see you on the radio. Bye.